Good. All right, so good morning, everyone, and welcome to our community of practice. It's actually our launch for the new school year, although many of you were participating all through the summer. So some of you were just, participants with us, but we look at this as one of our launches for the school year of our monthly communities of practice. It's so great seeing everyone, and we just hope that your school year has been off to a good start, despite definitely some bumps and bruises, as we know, with COVID. But thank you so much for taking the time to be here. We are recording this because I want to be fully transparent that when we set this date, we didn't realize it was a Jewish holiday, so we apologize for that. But we made the decision to keep moving forward, and we also are recording this. All right. So we thank you for your understanding. It was, an error on our part in the scheduling. So I just wanted to be fully transparent there. We have a great group of people in this space, and our attendance and engagement team under the leadership of Kari Sullivan, we're working hard to ensure that we're meeting your needs. So why don't we begin? I will drop okay, so let me pull this in. All right. So here's our engagement and work group. And we meet monthly and we also have a statewide advisory team to guide our thinking, to guide our work, to provide us with input to ensure that we're providing you with all of the resources and supports that you need, leading this work to build and improve attendance and engagement with your students. We created this slide for us this year, for us as a group, because we'll be meeting monthly to really engage in real collective critical inquiry and reflection. And what defines us? We are all here for the same reason. We're here for a common purpose. We're here to engage in the willingness to ask tough questions, to address shared challenges. All of these critical attributes of what an effective community of practice is. And I really applaud Kari and Jay for really creating this. I think it was last year or the year before, this sort of framework. So, all right. So I'm going to turn this over now to updates from Kari.
Okay. Next slide, please. So I wanted to start today and welcome everyone. I see lots of new faces, and I'm excited to start the new school year with our community of practice. I wanted to just kind of share the data from last year because it's always important for our planning to know where we're starting from. And you'll see that every one of these subgroups increased, some more than others. And you'll notice, I'm sorry, Steve, we can see you drop down menu. Yeah, that our chronic absence rate, and as of June of last year, this isn't the final release of chronic absent data, but as of our June collection for the month, the all students was at 20.7 versus 12.2. Our English learners almost doubled from 17.2 to 33.9. Students with disabilities went up to 32.5. You can see poverty as something of consideration went up to 36.1. Reduced lunch was at 21.1, and students who are not eligible for free meals were at 10.4. And students who are homeless was almost at 60%. And the concern, I just want you to know that these numbers are taken very seriously at the department. Both of our advisory groups, our internal and external, are considering these numbers, and we're focusing our strategies and support around how to work with families and students from these different populations. Next slide, please. I was on a call, a national webinar with Hetty Chang yesterday, and I'll be honest and humble, I'm stealing this from her. So she uses this all the time. The attendance reflects positive conditions for learning for children and families. And the point that really hit home for me is if we're going to increase attendance or academic achievement, we have to start with physical and emotional health and safety. And that's where we are at the beginning of the school year, making sure all of our families and students have what they need to feel secure and healthy at school. We're going to focus today and in October on relationships with families because they need to have trust with the districts and open communications two-way with schools and districts so that they know that their children are physically and emotionally healthy and safe at school. And I put in here a link to a report that was issued by Attendance Works a year or two ago, and I encourage you to take a look at that. So the relationships are, these 4 relationships are essential to put positive conditions for learning. Next slide, please. I want to just touch on this legislative update. Many of you know that the legislature passed Public Act 21-646, and in Section A, Section 19A and B, deals with mental health and wellness days. So students have the opportunity to be absent from school for up to 2 mental health wellness days during the school year. That starts this school year. They may not be taken consecutively. Guidance is being reviewed right now for release from the department around these 2 mental health and wellness days. What I can say is that because they're required by law, students should not be marked as unexcused for these days as long as they have parent permission. There was another point I wanted to make. And they should not count towards your truancy referrals because they're excused. They also, these mental health and wellness days will be counted in chronic absence because they are missed opportunities for learning for students. As you know, chronic absence is about prevention and support. And so taking these days is a great opportunity for conversations to see how we can better support and connect families to resources. So watch for that guidance. You're all on a listserv that I have, and so it will be sent out to you. Any questions regarding that?
When is,
Go ahead.
I'm
Lauren?
sorry, Larry Prentice from Thompson Public School District. When has that, you said it's beginning this school year, but look toward, what date it's coming out? When is it effective? Like
It was
now?
effective July 1st, and it was released in the legislative memo that comes out from the department, Circular 1. It came out over the summer. It was in that. We're putting together some guidance around policies and aligning practices that are equitable for rolling out this mental health and wellness policy.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so there's a question in the chat. Should districts have a different code for PowerSchool to denote this absence? The State Department of Education will not be collecting this data in our state collection. However, you can in your local student identification system, you can create a code, and it may be something you want to monitor for how often it's being taken, who's taking it, and there may be some information there to help you guide supports for students. I hope that answers your question about that. You can do that at a local level. I know some districts are. You're welcome, Christine. Any other questions? Okay. And the next slide, please. So in order to help districts with communications and attendance awareness campaigns, we have created with Attendance Works and the RESC Alliance some banners, parent handouts, posters, and coloring pages in English and Spanish that are posted on our website. We are going to put this PowerPoint in the chat, and these are all hot links, so you can get right to these wonderful pieces of artwork for you to share with families. Our home visitors, those who are working on LEAP and in home visiting, these are perfect for them to take on their home visits. As part of the National Attendance Awareness Campaign, which is linked at the bottom of the top paragraph, so you can get even more resources from attendance work there. They have stuff for social media. They have decals you can download, all kinds of really fun stuff. And there's actually some guidance documents there, and an upcoming webinar for the attendance awareness campaign is on September 29th. And I was remiss to put this into a deck, but I have sent out several notices, and we'll send another one out that Charlene Russell Tucker, our commissioner, will be on that national webinar with Hetty Chang and some others to discuss attendance. Next slide, please. Just want to remind you that the COP it started last January in 2020 with Ajit Kapala Christian, did a fantastic job on data. And it's the third Thursday of every month. It's targeted to district attendance leads because we want you to be within a group of peers who are approaching issues that you are as well, and so that you can discuss them together. We also had Talk Tuesday, which is a little less formal, more school-based, a broader audience that could come from community partners to home visitors, family liaisons, principals, the superintendents. But this, we're trying to keep the district attendance COP for the leads and for partners who may be relevant to the issue, like your PSIS coordinators or your special ed directors. Sometimes you may want to invite them to come too. So those are there. If you registered for this one, you're registered for all of them, and it's a recurring link. So you won't need to look for the link, just put it in your calendar on the third Thursday of every month. Next slide, please. So coming soon, frequently asked questions. This is something I've started to develop, and I'm looking for your help. Some of the questions that I get are things like, for 10 absences in a month for truancy, how do we define a month? How do I address issues related to attendance for students from multilingual families? How do I subscribe or unsubscribe to the Talk Tuesday listserv? How do we implement this new law that allows students to have 2 mental health and wellness days? How do you define in attendance on remote days compared to in-person days? I'm going to put all of these into one document, and it can be a living document where you can add to, including questions like, when are too many absences educational neglect? And what is the difference between Talk Tuesday and the COP? And what is Talk Tuesday all about? So I have put my email there. So if you have questions that you want to add to this FAQ that you receive often from your district or that you have yourself, please email them to me, and I'll be happy to consider them for the FAQ. We're going to talk about it again on Talk Tuesday if you are participating in those. So next slide, please. Parent-teacher home visits. Betsy Laborious is hosting a follow-up forum for districts, teams that have been trained. This is for districts that are already trained, not for new districts or new training, but if you want to check in and have your team share with other teams and learn from each other what's working and how you can support each other, the link is here. You'll see it in the PowerPoint. If you're interested in parent-teacher home visits, Betsy Laborious is your person. So give her send her an email, and she'll be happy to connect you with training. Next slide, please. And at this point, I'm so happy to introduce Ajit Kapala Christian, our Chief Performance Officer, and Irene Parisi, our Chief Academic Officer. They are going to talk today about remote learning and tracking attendance. So there's 2 slides with this that I just put in there because there's links for when we send it out, but you don't need to read them now. I'm going to turn it over to, I think, Irene at this point.
Sure. Thank you, Kari, and thank you, Stephen. I just want to go back to your very beginning in the opening. What I really appreciate about the community of practice, the 2 things that you would share, that we come here for a common purpose. So we certainly have something in common in what we're trying to do for our students. And I love the idea, that notion of collective intelligence, because we are all intelligent, and I want to make sure that we recognize that we all have something to bring to the table. Though Ajit and I are working through this work, we may not have all of the answers. So it is important to come together and see what solutions you're working through, and ideas and things that maybe we did not consider, so that we can get it out there and then work to refine, right, as we continue to go forward. This is an evolving process. So I appreciate you setting us up that way. The other thing you mentioned too is about relationships with families and in this work. And I'm going to keep coming back to that and pinging that, because that is important in this work, and certainly with remote learning and tracking attendance. The next thing I want to share is vocabulary. Vocabulary is critically important in these conversations together as colleagues and in district, but certainly with parents. I think what's continuing to happen is remote learning is being used to equate other things. And remote learning really speaks to the where, the location of learning and where it's taking place. And the delivery, or the how, is virtual. So just hold on to those two things, that remote speaks to location and virtual speaks to like part of the design and how we deliver instruction. And I think the slide that you had up, I think those are two critical pieces. One is, and I don't know if Stephen, if this was linked in, if we can link in, there was guidance that we had put out regarding the future of remote learning in Connecticut schools dated July 15th. I think if we could link to that, because I'm going to start there. And then the other one was, I saw the slide of it, the screenshot. It's a one-pager. Thank you, Ajit. The tracking daily attendance on remote days as the second tool. And what I'm going to model for you is that these two need to be considered side by side. It's not, let's look at one in a silo and then look at the other. It really is a connected approach and process. Great. Thank you, Stephen, for sharing. The first piece of guidance dated July 15th, page 3 is really important. And I think these are, this flow, this kind of workflow is critical for us. At the bottom, that last paragraph, when we're talking about what do we do when students require to leave the school. I don't think we're sharing the screen right now, but okay, so I see that in the chat. I don't know if we want to, if.
They give you, you want to share it, Irene?
No, I don't have anything to share. I was just thinking of, well.
Would you like us to pull it up and share it? Okay, thank you, Ajit.
Thank you. Yes, I know the visual is important. So yes, thank you, Ajit. This is the bottom of page 3 of that guidance that went out in July. And you'll notice the 1, 2, 3 that is marked there. Thank you. So these are the decisions you're making, right? And this is how you are determining if a student needs to be in isolation or quarantining. Sometimes you have to, students have to go out and for any kind of localized outbreak, and certainly if families are COVID fragile. So that's kind of step 1, where students now have to then be outside of the school structure on campus, and you have to think about, well, how can you provide the continuity of learning and continued educational opportunities, and that can remote learning play a role in this? And yes, remote learning plays a role, as well as virtual learning. So it is important to recognize that last year we were kind of like all in, like it was all hands on deck, all tools and resources were on deck, and we really designed a very robust approach for continuity of learning. Parents know that, that's their frame of reference. And they're now thinking, well, I want that still. I want that this year. Why can't I have what I had last year? And there are just some things that you're saying, that's just not possible. One of those things that we're hearing with frequency is the idea of concurrent teaching and learning. You've heard from your teachers that we just cannot do that design where I am teaching students that are in person, face to face, and then also teaching students that are learning from a remote location through a virtual platform. And some districts have made the decision we're not doing that concurrent approach to teaching and learning. And that's a local decision, and that is fine. However, if you do have students that now have to learn from a remote location, you can determine what is the best learning model. Is the learning model still virtual with some opportunities to learn in an asynchronous way, whether it's not kind of live streaming, as we were saying? Are there hours, like office hours, where the student can meet with the teacher? Are we sending home packets, hard copies of information where they can then send those back in? Or are we using our learning management system to have them engage still in a virtual platform from a remote location with their peers through discussion boards, Jamboards, and other different digital tools? All of that is part of your design. So I think that has to be taken into consideration. What would be the learning design model for students that meet one of these 3 points? I'll pause there for a moment because it's a lot to take in. Stephen or Kari, I'm not sure. Yes, I think there'll be some Q&A time for that. Yes, okay. So based on the learning model that you have determined, whether certainly they're working remotely and however they're accessing the learning in a virtual space or in like hard copy, if packets are being sent home and so on, you then do have to determine, how do I mark them for the track, or how do I track attendance? So that's that next document that lays side by side. So yep, perfect, thank you. So this formula still holds true, and it's a good formula. So you would then have to determine, well, if it's this, and then more of that time logged on, and then they're completing assignments and submitting it. And if this all adds up to being part of a school day at least half of the time, then we should be marking them attendant, having attended and being present. So it really is dependent on, all right, so what are the 3 triggers? What's happening? What is my design of that day for continuity of learning? And then if I add all of that up, if it equates to that half a day, adds up to the half day, then yes, we need to mark them of being in attendance. I'm now going to tag my partner Ajit to see if there's something I've overlooked or something we might need to add here.
No, I think you did a great job, Irene. I think it's a good summary, and we can take questions whenever we're ready. Perfect.
So Stephen and Kari, if you want to help facilitate some questions, that would be great.
So all we need for, if you have any questions specifically around the topic that Ajit and Irene just presented on, if you can drop them in the chat box, and then we can discuss them.
Or raise your hand.
Raise my hand.
Yeah.
Or raise your hand. Okay.
Yeah.
Denise Messina, great seeing you.
Hi. Hi. So here's the question. Just as I'm participating in this webinar today, I right before I got in here, I was looking at an email from a social counselor at the high school. So we have a student who's out, who was remote all last year, who has this is where the difficulty comes in. He's got an anxiety diagnosis, and it now appears is agoraphobic, has not left the house. You know, my staff has done what they can to give resources to the family to make sure they're getting outside help. I feel like a dilemma that we have, and certainly from the work that I've done and all of the training that I've had around, you know, the anxiety piece is, you know, this becomes so entrenched. And so, you know, an easy thing to do from an attendance standpoint and from an academic standpoint is start to give them remote services. But if we started doing remote services for every case that presents as anxiety, that is problematic. Additionally, it can make the school refusal worse if in fact there is not the expectation of coming to school, which has now been sort of substituted by remote learning, because the remote learning actually is satisfying the need to avoid school coming in. So I'm just wondering, you know, that this is so nuanced when it comes to the issues of school refusal and anxiety after this past year where we have actually have, given the option of remote learning. I'm just wondering all of your thoughts on that, how to navigate that. I mean, we've done incremental programs where we try to have the student come in, for a period or two a day, collaborating with the outside clinician. If we can get the outside clinician, then we get, the family says, well, you'll have to provide us transportation for that. I mean, it really becomes a huge issue and very, can wind up being very costly as well.
And I do understand, and I hear everything that you're saying. And what I want to say and recognize is that system of care, that web of care that you're providing, that goes back to the relationship with the families, number one, and really knowing the needs of each individual student to make those decisions is what's critically important. It is a case-by-case basis. I do understand and appreciate the time that is required in order to fully understand what the needs are and then wrap that child up with all the resources to access learning. The case-by-case basis is critical, and that's where working locally of what do we do if, so if this, then this. And it sounds like you're on the right track, Diane. It is a process, and I don't have a perfect answer, but I do know what is working for districts, and hearing from them is the more we know about the student, the more we deeply understand the details of why that student is asking or may require to be remote. And once we understand the why, what are we going to do in the moment to ensure that they have access? So what are all the resources we can wrap around them, but also what is the plan to help them return to school? So what is the iterative plan that we are creating and designing so that the goal is to get them back to school for situations such as the one that you presented? Ajit, I don't know if you had another thought or anyone else. Again, this is collective intelligence, so anyone can weigh in.
Hi, this is Jay. Could I ask, is this a student with an IEP? Is it a student with a disability identified already? Diane, or is it Diane or Denise? I apologize.
Oh, maybe I apologize. I may have misspoke.
Sorry, I put myself back on mute, so let me get it back in here. No, this student was not previously on an IEP or a 504. We're now going to have a 504 meeting because we have the pediatrician now giving the diagnosis of, anxiety. The family does not have an outside clinician at this point. The family is now saying, geez, we really should have done that. We didn't know it was this bad. The student is not voicing that he has adversity to coming to school. He now has adversity to being in a car if it's running. What we have done so far is conversations with mom, a Zoom with the student, a home visit, providing mom with, resources. We're sort of left with now having had to mark that student as absent. We understand the tension between, once the students miss so much work, that now becomes something you add to the student. We didn't really have a justification or rationale to provide remote learning until recently. There was no 504 plan. So the student now has just accumulated all these absences. And this is a case in point, but I know I'm speaking for many directors who have many cases like this. This is not our only case like this. And the amount of resources that are expended to manage this and to do the right thing, because I do think the right thing is we get the outside clinician, we get a consent to release, we work in partnership, we have a plan to get the student back in school, which might require, as I said, transportation, one-to-one transportation, because it's off of school hours, having the student coming in for incremental periods of time. That's what, anybody who's dealing with cognitive behavioral therapy around anxiety would tell you, it's incremental approximations. So you would do that. But it's really, there's no, it's a lot of resources. And also at the same time, we're concerned with our absentee rate, because we're having to code that student as absent. I know you don't have any answers for me. I feel like we've checked the boxes of all the things. We're doing what you would ask us to do. I'm just saying it just doesn't fall into place that easy. We'll still have those absences. It might take us months to get that student back in school full time. And we don't want to also reinforce the maladaptive behavior of school avoidance. So that's an issue as well.
Yes.
Okay.
The other thing that I'm thinking of as you're speaking to, so now all of this is accumulated, right? As you're saying, it's a layer upon layer. So I'm just wondering, is there a possibility of working with your academic teams? And is there a way to prioritize pieces of the learning from along the way that have been missed? And by prioritizing those academic areas or just those competencies outlined in each of the areas with their whatever the course load might be, and maybe creating a specific learning plan around that. And like if they can complete that amount of work, where it's not everything, it's not the whole scope of like what you would expect in a standard seat time moment. But if you could customize a learning plan with the priority competencies or like what you expect them to demonstrate, that might reduce some anxieties. It gives them the learning in bite-sized chunks. And if they can at least demonstrate that by a certain date, would that cumulative maybe restore in some way? And maybe we can kind of let go of other things and give them credit. They feel a sense of accomplishment.
We have, like I said, we don't have a 504 plan yet, but we have had 504 plans. This maybe then questions whether it's really a 504 and IEP, because now maybe are you actually modifying, but where we have said essential knowledge and skills only, to focus on essential knowledge and skills, like as you said, competencies. So I get this. I guess I'm going to put something out, like an idea to put out to all of you, is when districts are faced with this, these communities of practice are great, but it's almost like I like to be able to dial into someone who's my coach at the state level to talk through the case by case.
Yeah.
So that, because I feel like what happens for me in my district is people are turning to me to say, we did everything you asked us to do, and we're, can we code this student differently? Is there this, is that, and then I'm sort of improvising along the way. I feel like I am doing everything that, was asked for. So, anyway, thank you. It's just a suggestion that maybe.
Sure, I did make a note of that. So I'll take it back to the team.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Denise. Are there any other questions? You can use the raise your hand emoji while we have a G and Irene in this space.
Hi, Rachel Newer.
Hi, Rachel. How are you?
Hi, good, thank you. It's not as much of a question as much of something that I've been thinking about. And I think we're all just terribly worried that our chronic absence numbers are going to be horrendous because of some of these kids that are just really struggling to get back into the building, like my previous colleague just mentioned. And so I think one of the things that I'm telling myself was, if we were to solve these problems in the next month, then after that, it will look better. But we know that chronic absence doesn't start October 1st. It's already begun. And so I do want to just share with all of you that that's one of our fears, is that it's just going to look horrendous because of these kids that, I have one that hasn't even stepped foot in the building, but we have a PBT scheduled for next Wednesday. So our hope is that we can get him on track. But of course he's going to be chronically absent. There's no way he's not going to be. So I do think that's one of the concerns that a lot of us have about these students who have struggled to come back or, have anxiety, all those things, is that it's going to take a lot of time to get them into a regular routine. Meanwhile, we're just going to tank when it comes to our chronic absence numbers. So I just wanted to share that feedback.
If I could respond to that, we know that there's going to be issues with chronic absence numbers. And what I've said from the beginning is just because your chronic absence doesn't mean bad. Chronic absence gives you information that helps you plan and respond to what's happening in the school or with certain students or in a district. And so we look at that data and it tells a story. And so we don't look at that data and say, oh, your chronic absence is atrocious or it tanked. We look at it as this is the reality of what's happening with your students. And we need to figure out with all these ESSER dollars and SEL and everything that's happening. When I started, we looked at safety and mental health are the first things. And we know from surveys that families are very concerned about safety and that students have trauma and issues related to being home last year that's making it difficult to come to school. So I would say, and Ajit, I don't know, and Irene, if you would agree with this, but I would say, stop worrying so much about the data and worry about the kids and the school and the students and doing what's best for them. And because I think we're all in the same place. If that helps, Rachel.
Yeah, and I wanted to add something to what you said about the anxiety. So what can we do to reduce the anxiety? And if the end game, that the aim is to get students back into school, what can we do? So what we are hearing from other districts and being really creative and innovating from the inside out is they are offering tours to families when the whole school is kind of shut down, when no one else is in the building. They're offering, you can come in during this time and tour the building, tour a classroom, and here you can see where exactly your child will sit. This is your child's desk. They're going to be all the way over near the window or away from others. They're trying to provide those assurances. Another thing I have heard too is the idea of after-hour type of programming where it's a reduced number of students. And it's not lost on me. I understand there's a lot of resources put to this and extended hours in your day, but we're also hearing that it's having an impact and the kids are coming back to school with confidence. The families feel like, okay, I have trust in my school and my child's going to be safe. But I would say the lead one is coming in, having a dedicated tour just to that family of the building, and they know exactly where am I sitting in the classroom, where will I be in the cafeteria, how are the hallways organized, where are the sanitation stations, anything that they would be wondering about, they give them that customized tour, and that has been super helpful.
I feel that those are real high leverage strategies. When I think about even as we move into our discussion later on, just some of our more hard to reach students, as we say, to really, try to differentiate and how do we adjust to try to get our students re-engaged. Those are some great strategies that I hear that schools are putting into place. Ms. Moran, you have your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to mention, we've always had students who, for one reason or another, have been unable to physically attend school for some period of time. And regardless of our absentee numbers, our goal was really for the child to have the opportunity to be educated. And if we learned nothing else last year, there are lots of things that we learned to do last year that we didn't know how to do before, which I think ultimately provides a lot of students with more opportunities. I could even see this revolutionizing the way we deal with students who are expelled from school, or students who have long-term illnesses or surgeries, things like that, that in the past we've tried to provide a physical human being. We now know how to use a lot of other tricks that might be able to provide even better opportunities for those kids.
Thank you for that. I agree.
Ronnie,
How are we doing? Good morning.
good, how are
everyone.
you, Ron?
Well, with New Haven Board of Education. I had a situation that's like you guys are talking about. The young lady had anxieties, and what we did, we got with the parent and find out what she would really like to do. So we've come up with an alternative program, which is Job Corps. The young lady wants to be a truck driver, so that is offered in that program. So we're working now with her to go through this alternative program with the Job Corps. Unfortunately, it takes them out of the regular New Haven system, but again, we're looking at for the child's welfare. So that's what we're working on at this point.
Thank you for those comments. Are there any other thoughts, questions, I wonder statements that you may have? I'm not seeing any other hands raised. All right. Well, I want to take this opportunity, and I think to really thank Irene and Ajit for being here and really facilitating. Oh, forgot one more, Jenna Flores.
Yeah, hi, good morning.
Sorry.
I'm Jeannie Flores. I'm from New Haven. I'm one of the dropout prevention specialists. And I do have a question, actually a concern, and we're working on a case right now in New Haven where a family has a child in the high school, has a 504, and the child had a kidney transplant, did online last year. She was fine doing it that way. And this year, at the beginning of the school year, she was in the hospital again. And with COVID happening, the mom is very, iffy about sending her back to school to the point that the doctor said, if there's any way that in her 504 plan, there's something that specifies that she can get online education or homebound services without somebody going into the home or her going out into the community like a library getting the education or the tutoring. I know that I spoke to the DPS for the school that we're talking about, and they were looking into that to see if that can be agreed on, to see if there is anything that we can do for this family. Again, the child has a 504, kidney transplant, went back into the hospital. She's been truant right now. Unfortunately, they're all excused. They're all excused because we have doctor documentation. So they're not truant. I would say they're all excused. But she wants her child to get back on track. But with all this happening, we don't know what to do. Carrie, I need your help.
I was going to jump in. I mean, it sounds like you do know what to do. You're doing all the right things. So I applaud you for that. Again, this goes back to what do you have control over in district that you can put in the hands of the child so that there is some way to connect, right? Even if it is to just connect with another adult that is different than her doctor or perhaps a counselor, but is there a physical education teacher or a health teacher, her favorite teacher to just connect with and have some sort of open office hours to talk through some of the topics or to keep her connected to the day-to-day and the goings on of the high school. That I think is a good first step, and that would be important. And then how do you start to layer in some of the academic or even some ways to develop that social emotional type of skill set too. So you're doing the right work. You're taking all that into consideration, really understanding the child and the needs, but maybe a first step might be just connect with another adult in the building outside of the others that are surrounding her right now, or even a peer in a controlled way so that she feels like her network is really growing.
That's wonderful, Irene. Really great response. And I think there are situations in life that will cause these barriers to coming to school, like health and hospitalization. And Irene explained it very well. And that gets at the students' trust of the school district and relationships and remaining connected. and who can help with that. And as she's able to, look at the academic part of it with a 504. And I don't know if she's special needs or not, a student with disability, but I'm glad you clarified that those are excused absences and she would not be truant, right? So thank you, Jeannie, for everything you're doing to support that child and the family. Any other questions at this point? I know Steve and team have quite a bit to go through on their agenda. So on my FAQ slide, you all can download the PowerPoint deck. My email's there. Please, I get them all the time, and I love to hear from you guys and to connect on the questions. So please email me, and I'll be happy to discuss and respond.
And
Thanks, Irene.
And again, thank you, Irene and Ajit, for being here to facilitate this conversation. And as we say, this is collective intelligence, sharing ideas, strategies that, that are working in your district, and perhaps some of our other participants can, without reinventing the wheel, take some of these strategies and use in their districts. And I know that each and every child has their own unique experiences. So I know that poses some challenges as well. But thank you so much for being here and taking time out of your schedules to support our community of practice.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all. So so we'll continue to have, and still continue to share these types of questions because they're going to come up with the daily changes that are affecting us with this variant and with the challenges, and students have been out of school for quite a while and now they're trying to re-enter school. We're going to have a lot of challenges. And so, all right, let me share let's continue where we're going. Okay. These are the two documents. Now we're going to, which actually I think was a really good segue into our conversation today and the next community of practice. So we're setting context today, beginning to develop some common understanding, common vision in preparation for our next community practice, which is October 21st. And how do we now really take a deeper look around equitable practices for our multilingual learners, our students with disabilities, students experiencing homelessness, and our students from diverse socioeconomic status. Those are some of our real hard to reach students, and some of them have had real challenges with engagement, and we've had some real, and I'm sure you've had some challenges with trying to engage some of our families. So this is what we'd like to do today, and in preparation and set some context. So I'm going to go through these slides pretty quickly because this is a continuation from our August 19th, where we really did a deeper dive. If some of you were in the space on August 19th, when we launched, when in May, the CT Accelerate framework was released, we talked about these critical areas around the acceleration cycle. So when we think about our students, when we think about our families, we need to begin to prioritize. We need to begin to, let me just move this. Plan and partner with the different teams, community members, school and central office teams, to really begin to look at practices and strategies that are high leverage, evidence-based to implement to address attendance and engagement. All right, how are we going to be monitoring and adapting? How are we going to be really looking at some key data tools to monitor for fidelity and to really build and strengthen our progress monitoring process? And then how are we going to begin to provide feedback to engage? How are we going to really work on building that strong feedback and engagement protocols to build, but more so evaluate and sustain the practices that we're implementing? So this is all hands on deck. This is our team approach. So we're gonna set the context today, and we have Judy Carson to just launch 3 critical slides before we go into breakout rooms to really begin to discuss family engagement at a deeper level with some of our other groups of students that we need to address. Okay, Judy.
All right, thank you, Steve, and thank you everyone for being here today. So I want to do a little bit of a reframe. Many of you may have seen the state's framework and definition for family engagement. I want to bring it into this conversation, and specifically for the populations of families that we're going to be talking about in our breakout sessions. Something I want to underscore is I do want to bring in family voices to this session. And so our definition was developed with families, with professionals, a couple of hundred people. And we did reach out to those specific groups we're talking about today. We worked with community-based organizations to learn from families whose children have disabilities. And we had translators for families who do not speak English. So it's informed. I know we don't have families in our meeting today, but when you go back and talk with people at the district and start thinking about your plan, I invite you to use the process and the questions that we used at the state to develop our understanding of family engagement with our constituents in Connecticut. We asked 3 questions. What does family engagement mean to you? What does it look like when it's working well? What do you wish that your school did differently? Those questions, that was an hour-long conversation and more. We also use the same questions with professionals and with community partners. And the answers were concurrent with each other, and they were concurrent with the research, which is great. We're all on the same page. However, we're doing things that aren't quite getting us where we want to go. So we need to look at what we might do differently. The answer, and I think many of you have seen this when we talk about full, equal, and equitable partnerships. On the right are actual family quotes. And because we distilled a number of documents and quotes into this definition, but I wanted to unwrap it a little bit and tell you what the meaning is behind these words. For full, we got comments like family engagement means families are active participants and communication is flowing between home and school. What we also heard is that families very often feel that their engagement is very narrow and time specific. What they want is a fuller opportunity to participate in every part of their children's education. And they're looking for information that's more timely. In family engagement, we're pretty good about giving families information about things that have already happened. And that's not a way for them to be active and involved. So the breadth of the communication and engagement and also the timeliness definitely came through. When they talked about equal, they talked about being welcome partners and a valued voice. This is where the word partnership really came in. They don't like involvement. They don't like engagement. The word partnership is what resonated with them, understanding they have people that have different roles, but they can have equal status and equal value at the table. And then finally, equitable. So we heard so much about this, as you can imagine. One of the quotes that came out was quite frank. This parent said, I hope the teachers and staff will be open-minded and disregard implicit biases that are disrespectful and hurtful to families. I mean, they were in person and in some surveys we had, they were very, very candid. They also talked about systemic equity and reducing barriers. And families said they're noticing barriers. They'd like to work with the school to reduce those barriers for others. So as we're looking at the planning and thinking you're going to do, I just invite you to take a reflective look using this lens that families brought to us. And let me go a little bit deeper. Next slide, Steve. So we're drilling down to make it actionable for you. And so we have guiding principles. And really, those are indicators of equity. if we saw these indicators at work in a school, we'd say, I think that school's moving towards very equitable partnerships. But again, quotes from families, they're looking for mutual respect, honesty, and trust. Trust and respect were number one, and you've heard trust and respect a number of times today. That was absolutely the top priority for every audience that we talked with. And then this quote too, from another parent, talking about wanting staff to approach this with their heart. That's the real relationship, right? That's the authenticity when we talk about authentic family engagement. And this will lead into some of our discussions in just a minute in the breakouts. And they really want to build these positive relationships without judgment and expectation. And that is a common need across the board. So let me use a graphic here to help you think about how do you do this and how do we prioritize? Because that's kind of a lot. Full, equal, and equitable. Those are big things. How do we prioritize and what can we do in our planning? So first, of course, building trust and respect. Absolutely job one. And it has to be done first. Bear with me on my graphic here. So it's the fertile soil that everything else grows in, as we say. The other opportunities will not land if there isn't trust and respect built first. And in each of our breakouts, you'll be working with my colleagues who are experts working with the different populations we're talking about today to talk about what does trust and respect mean to different families. It can look different and mean different things. And then, of course, two-way conversations and listening. Oftentimes we have a one-way conversation going with families. The stretch for us is that two-way conversation, and that's what builds the trust and respect. And then third, as we're going up the little plant here, seeing parents as assets and leaders. And that's really the strong stock, if you will, that's going to be the bridge to helping parents support their children. And those are all relational. That's the first job. Then the fruit bears. And so that's really linking family engagement to student learning. That's the number one thing parents want to know. They want to know, how is my child doing? And what can I do to help? And I'm sure that you hear this. That is the information they're consistently looking for, and that they often say they don't get in a way that's actionable for them. So again, listening to families and understanding what it is they need and how it needs to be presented so that they can really use it. And then all of this is in an environment of culturally responsive practice. And families talked about wanting to be more connected to the school and to the teachers to share their own culture that's in their home and to share what supports their student. So I think as you're prioritizing your activities, the advice would be to start with that fertile soil and work from there. Next slide, please. So to talk just a bit more about trust. We talked about data and analyzing data. You know, we can measure trust. We can collect data on trust. There's tools, there's ways to do it. And that's because it is such an important foundational part of successful schools. It's hard to see down there, but we have evidence the level of trust between families and schools is a predictor of student performance. And Dr. Karen Mapp, leader in this field, says that before any other partnership work can be done, trust has to be built. So there are ways, as I said, of looking at it. There are tools. For instance, this is a commonly used tool with 4 indicators that you can ask and as you're working with families. I won't go through all of them, but the first one, am I seeking input and listening carefully to what families have to say? And that demonstrates respect. And then we can look at how are we demonstrating competence? How are we showing them we honor the families and we value them? How are we being true to our word with families and truly building trust? And then how are we caring about them as people versus objects? And that relates back to that quote you saw on the previous slide where the parent was asking, please approach me with your heart. And that's going to be the relationship that really serves student achievement in our planning and in our work. So with that, I just want to leave you with this as some food for thought. We're going to use some tools in the breakouts that perfectly align with what we've just talked about, and then talk about how to customize these concepts for your families and your schools. Thanks, Steve. And I don't know if there's any questions, but we also have the breakout time to talk.
So thank you so much. Let me see if there's any questions.
I don't
Okay.
think so.
No, I don't see any. Let me just. So Judy, can you just give an overview of what the State Department of Ed, and in some of our work that we're doing, we're referencing the key documents from this entity called Flamboyant. Can you just give just an overview of this entity that we're referencing a lot of their tools with? Just because I think you have a much better understanding of that group than I do, because you've worked with them.
I have, sure, I'm happy to do that. So you may not have heard of them. They're a small foundation in Washington, D.C., but they've been doing family engagement work for well over 20 years, and they are darn good. One of the things I really like about the materials and the tools they develop is they're working in schools. They're working in schools in Washington, D.C. very deeply, and also schools in Puerto Rico. Those are their two catchment areas. And they use these tools on the ground. One of the first schools they started working with closely was one of the lowest achieving schools in Washington, D.C., which means it's one of the lowest achieving schools in the nation. And through using information like what I just shared with you and what we're going to see in a moment, they built trust with families. And these were families that for 3 generations had lost trust in that school. There was absolutely no family engagement, ground zero. They went into the community. They went to families' homes. They started from the basement and built their way up. And a lot of it was about staff training. A lot of it was about shifting attitudes and biases. And a lot of it was just about listening. And they have the fabulous website, a number of videos. And there's one I love where a parent says, no one ever came from that school to talk to me. No one ever told me how my child's doing and asked me how I thought my child was doing and how I thought that she could improve. And she said now she and the teacher talk to each other. And when that child's having a bad day, she calls the teacher and says, bless your heart, you're in for it. So they developed a real relationship and a real understanding of the child. So that work took 5 to 7 years. But that's why I so much like their tools. We don't have to take 5 to 7 years. We can learn from them.
Well, thank you so much. And I just thank you for really setting the stage with the framework from the State Department of Education around equitable family engagement practices. And now that we have a joint position statement where you mentioned culturally responsive practices, you know, we have the joint position statement that the State Department of Education released this summer. So now what we've dropped into the chat box are 3 critical resources, because in our conversations as in a work group and what we've heard from different members of the COP throughout the years, as well as our advisory group, how are we really drilling down and differentiating what family engagement looks like, sounds like, how it's implemented for really these 4 critical groups of families and students. Our students experiencing homelessness, our multilingual learners, our students with disabilities, and our students from diverse socioeconomic status. Flamboyant created these 3 great tools to help you lead this work back in your schools to really build that common understanding, that common language, and really that common differentiated approach around what family engagement really looks like for all. How do we really, what are those high leverage strategies for those really hard to reach or almost unreachable families? How are we going to target those groups? And also a great document for you to help lead the work on challenging those assumptions, challenging some of those implicit biases. So those are dropped into the chat box. Can everyone please download them now before we go into breakout rooms? Because what we're going to do in our breakout rooms is really engage in just some conversation, give you some time to unpack them, look at them, us beginning to center ourselves. So when we come back in October 21st, we're going to ask you to identify one of those groups of students that really has become a real strong question of practice for your school or your district. And we will have 4 separate breakout rooms for those 4 groups facilitated by our lead consultants to support that work. But we wanted to have today to set the context with what our State Department of Ed common definition is, and to share with you some tools for you to really begin to start thinking about strategizing. And we're going to try to really, next in October, do some real powerful brainstorming to help support you and using the collective wisdom and intelligence to help support one another. So as everyone, just thumbs up if you've downloaded those 3 tools in your, great. Have those handy. All right. So now I'm going to put us in 5. There's 46 of us right now. So we could do 4 breakout rooms. And really just to begin to unpack, it's 11:10 and Kari has been incredibly diligent throughout this whole process to honor your time. And when we say we end at 11:30, we end at 11:30, if not a little bit sooner, to totally honor your time. All right. So now what I'm going to do is just create our 4 breakout rooms. Yeah, we did
Steve,
this.
just 1 minute. There's a question in the chat about needing a password. Does anyone know what that's about? Is anyone else getting that prompt? No? Okay.
All right. So let's,
Okay.
I'm going to create 4 breakout rooms. Jay, if you get in, you're going to do breakout room 1, Megan breakout room 2, Gladys breakout room 3. I'll do breakout room 4. All right, so 4.
And how much time are we designating this time?
We are going to be
Steve?
coming back here at 11, it's 11:08, 11:20. All right, just to get us 10 minutes to begin to get the conversation going in preparation for next. Okay. So I'm going to be in group 4. Let's see, group 1. Jay, you're right. Group
Will it be
2.
sending us in?
Yeah, I'll be sending you in. Group 2. Actually, we have Judy in group 2. Group 3, we've got Kari. In group 4, we've got, let me move. Gladys, I'm going to move you to group 3. All right, and then Megan, I'm going to move you to group 2. And we are set to go. All right. I will let you know when we come back. So 11:20.
If anyone's still here, you should have a button on the side that asks you to join the room that you're supposed to be in. And you'll see it on the bottom. Just click on that. Is anyone else having problems? You click down at the bottom of your screen. There should be a button where you need to click join in order for you to join your breakout room. Earl, do you need any assistance? I can't, you're muted. I just clicked it to ask you to unmute. I can't hear you.
Yeah, I guess I'm in. Well, I
So-
see, I'm by here. I'm just by myself, I guess. I don't,
No, you're supposed to be in room 1. So down in the right-hand corner, I think, of your screen, there should be a join button, or right down at the bottom. Click on that join button. That'll put you into the breakout room.
I don't see that,
Let's see.
Joan.
Yep, it's either by your floating bar or on the side.
Let's see, I'm looking. I don't see a join button.
All right, let's see if I can get you. You should see one now down at
Yeah.
the bottom. Do you see it?
Hi, Pablo. My name's Lauren. I spoke to you a couple of days ago about taking us to MetLife Stadium in October. Yeah, yeah, I have to cancel. I apologize. I wanted to do it first thing, but one of my colleagues' children has COVID. So they have to get rid of everything and we're giving our tickets up to other people. So I understand, but wanted to let you know ASAP. Yes, you were. Yeah, that's funny. I'm a Giants fan, but but yeah, with the LA Rams game, what you call it, the Giants game, LA Rams game on October. Oh, tonight it's gotta be the Giants. Come on. I can't, you know what my only problem, and this is my problem with the NFL period, how we recycle coaches. There should be a rule that you can't take a coach from a team that you hate. I hate the fact that we have Jason Garrett. I can't believe that he's our offensive coordinator. He couldn't do it for the Cowboys. How was he gonna be? I can't get over stuff like that. It kills me. If anything, I'm just gonna keep your number so that we can chat about football. But I'm gonna call you the next game we're going to. You're gonna be our ride. Oh, go right ahead. I appreciate that. You keep my number, please. I will definitely. We will have an ongoing. You will be my pen pal during football season. There you go. All right. Thank you, Pablo. You too. Bye. Is it near impossible for you to get October 22nd and 23rd off for your daughter? Question mark.
We're back. Well, I wanted to just a shout out to my group. I had an awesome group, great perspectives, great points to really consider and to think about and reflect on. So I appreciate the group that I was in.
Wait a
So what
minute,
I'd
are we
like to do-
competing? Are groups competing? Because I had a fantastic,
I know.
had
a fantastic group. I'm shouting them out.
team.
Okay.
I had the greatest team.
Yeah. So in context, some of you may be, I'm not sure by all the names, but yesterday was the launch for a high school community of practice around building, strengthening equitable family engagement practices. So yesterday was the launch, and it reminded me we all have our assigned breakout rooms, and we were all competing with each other on who had the best room and the best conversation. But really, we had our launch yesterday, and so we will be rolling out some of these documents as we move forward. But we hope that this began to get you to stimulate your thinking in preparation for what we'd like to do for the next session. So let me just pull that up and we'll close out today because we're right on time. So this is really what we'd like for you to leave today, but using the framework that Judy Carson launched with us today and those 3 documents from Flamboyant to begin to think about a question of practice with precision. So as we shared, we want to now drill down to these real diverse student groups and diverse family groups, all right? And we want you to begin to think about, because we're going to engage you in some strategic decision-making and powerful brainstorming on how do we help support and address questions of practice for these 4 groups of students in a differentiated way to support the work in doing the best we can to engage these families. And we're really going to, at the bottom, using that challenging assumptions document from Flamboyant is really a critical document. All right, so we did that. We're not going to have time for breakout. We're not going to have time for chair. So this is what we're going to be doing next October 21st. Please come back because this is where we'll really think about your questions of practice, think about your groups of students. We'll have a breakout room just for you to address your question of practice around multilingual learners, a breakout room for just those participants who want to engage in a conversation around students with disabilities. The same goes with our students from diverse socioeconomic status, as well as our students experiencing homelessness. So please mark the date. And we're really going to try to, use this model, we've got to create that sense of urgency. And how are we building your coalition with your teams all the way through a model of systems change to help support. And this is what we are, collective wisdom, sharing ideas, feedback, what's working for you. Let's not keep duplicating or replicating. Let's find really practices that are working for everyone. We asked you to use this. Begin between now and next month. Really begin to use this root cause analysis toolkit. Use those 3 documents to begin doing some root cause work around some of your groups of students. All right. And are there any questions? We are right on time. Any question, any thoughts from my colleagues, Jay, Gladys, Megan? Do you think we hit the mark in preparation for next session? Great.
I think it will be really helpful to, this is kind of a stage setter. And so I encouraged my group to kind of think of this as sort of a part A, sort of just familiarizing ourselves with the documents. And I think digging in and having a really robust discussion with our colleagues the next time around will be, part B and an important part B to have.
Great.
I saw that Kenneth Joseph has a question. Do parents notify about ahead of time, or do we mark those days as mental health? So where's Kenneth? So the mental health and wellness days, we have guidance coming out, but they should be there should be notification from families, documented permission for those. They don't have to be, they shouldn't be approved necessarily because the law allows them to take them. So so I hope that answers your question. If they have to ask in advance or approve in advance, they don't have to say like 2 days before you have to ask for a mental health day, because with mental health, it could be that day. So we do ask that you monitor those families and students and see if there's any other resources that they might need when they use mental health and wellness day. And so districts will have to find out a way to notify parents of these in their policy handbook after they develop a policy. It's an excellent opportunity to educate folks around what healthy mental health is and how to take care of your mental health and make sure your child has healthy mental health. I can't think of a better way to say it, but you can't have good health without good mental health. So it's a great way to educate families, provide resources, and be careful not to get into this, oh, we get 2 more days kind of conversation. That these days are specifically to support students who are having some issues, and how do we support those students?
All right, thank you, Kari.
Thank you, Kenneth.
And last but not least, I ask, we have 1 minute to share, 1 minute to spare. We value your feedback. Can everyone just do this evaluation?
Please. Can we put it in the chat, Steve?
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah.
All right, so you take a minute and do this evaluation. It will be in, I'll send out the PowerPoint to everyone on the distribution list for district attendance leads. If you're on this call and somebody else told you about it and you want us to continue to send you information, put your name, district, and email address into the chat, and I'll add you to distribution list. Okay.
Okay.
I'd like to thank Steve. Honestly, I just want to take a second to thank you, Steve Prophet, and Megan and Gladys, Jay Brown, Lewis, Judy, for a fantastic job today. And all of you who are here, we are here for you. This time is for you to discuss attendance. And we hope you can join us the 3rd Thursday of each month. Thank you, everyone.
Great. And just so again, next on the 21st, we'll send out more information about it, but really we're going to share with you some protocols, and we're going to use those 3 documents to really help you in those 4 different breakout rooms that you've selected. All right. Thank you so much for being here and all of your collective knowledge and wisdom in this great community of practice.
Thank you, everyone. Great job today.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Lauren, for all of your help.
Thank you, Lauren.
You are welcome. Sorry I wasn't on camera today.
That's okay.
There
Great.
you are.
Say now that everyone's gone.
Nice to see you.
It's nice to see you guys too. Yeah, everything went smooth today. I got a couple people that registered and I put the link in and they were fine. I only got a couple of emails, so
Excellent.
it worked well.
We'll just, hopefully we'll get into our routine, right?
Yeah,
And
I think we're good. I was just trying to make,
Reginald, thank you for your comments. You really helped our conversation today.
he's muted.
you're muted.
Not shown as muted, so something's
No, it's
going on
not.
for him.
Yep, so
All right.
I'm gonna do that.
Thank you, team.
Okay,
Great job, guys.
We monitored and adjusted.
We did.
We did.
I think the conversation with Jeet and Irene was really important.